In this video we're going to be looking at the new foot pivot system that's been integrated into Cat2. To do this we need to create a new character, and with this character we need to add at least one absolute animation layer and take our character out of setup pose. Now if we select the foot platform at the base of the leg and zoom in, we can now see that in the motion panel we've got a blue cross right at the center of this foot. Now if we rotate this foot, it always rotates around the blue cross. There is also the sub-object mode button. The sub-object mode button has been enabled in the motion panel. If we click on this button, we can actually move the blue cross around. We can position the blue cross at a new location, go out of sub-object mode, and now when we rotate our foot, the foot still rotates around that blue cross. Now, to show how effective this new foot pivot system is, we'll start by lowering the pelvis a little bit and moving the foot backwards. The blue cross is very easy to animate and follows all the same rules as standard animation in Max. If I right click on the timeline with this foot platform selected, I create keyframes. With the position checkbox turned on, keyframes are created on the basic position controller and the foot pivot position controller. Now, with this pivot set to where it is, if I rotate the foot using the rotate tool, it will pitch up around using that blue cross as a center for its rotation. Now, out of sub-object mode, I'd like to move this whole foot forward. Oops, edit undo. I should go to a different time and move this whole foot forward, and then rotate this foot back down. The foot is still rotating around the blue cross, so I need to lift it up so that the heel is roughly on the surface of the ground when we go to plant. So far, our foot pitches up around that blue cross, moves forward, and now we'd like to pitch it back down around the heel to create a nice foot planting action. So to do this, we go to sub-object mode, grab the pivot, and move it back down to the base of the heel. Now go to a different time, go back out of sub-object mode, and rotate the foot. And the foot still rotates around the blue cross. I may choose to move my pelvis forward throughout the sequence so that our foot pelvis can always reach. So we can now see, if we select this foot object again, the blue cross starts at the tip of the foot where we are rotating around at the start of the animation, and as we move forward the blue cross slides to the back of the foot and we end up with the blue cross positioned at the heel, and we can now plant around the heel. At this point in time we may wish to lift our foot off the ground a little bit so we can create an actual stepping motion. So I might just extend our timeline a little bit. Now at this point in time we can see the blue cross is at the heel, and I can now I might create some keyframes and then move the blue cross at a different time forwards a little bit. When we move this blue cross, we can move it in any direction we wish. We can move it up or down or side to side. So now I've positioned this blue cross at a new position. I'd like to now rotate the foot around this position. So frame 107, go back out of sub-object mode, and we can do any kind of animation with our foot that we desire. So in this situation I'd like to do a twisting action, and even maybe bring it up a little bit. So you can see that no matter what kind of animation we do, our foot always rotates, the foot platform always rotates around the blue cross. Now let's move this pivot again, and this time we should move this pivot not in an XY position, or not across the surface of this foot platform, but move it well off the surface up into this position here. Now go back out of sub-object mode. Now I always right click and create keyframes so that our rotations start after the pivot's moved, and now when we create rotation keyframes here, we can see that the blue cross the foot still rotates around the blue cross. So this new foot pivot system is very easy and powerful. Also, if we want to go back and edit our animation, we just simply need to open up the Curve Editor. And here in the Curve Editor, we can see on our foot platform, we have a special kind of controller. This controller manages both the pivot movements and a standard position rotation scale controller. So with the pivot track selected, we can see all the keyframes that have been created to edit the motion of our pivot over this timeline. It's very easy to go back and edit these keyframes, and we can change the time or value of any of these keyframes at will. Our foot will always move around the blue cross no matter where it is. Be aware though, however, that foot pivot movements are history dependent. The movement of the pivot at the start of the animation actually determines the overall position of the foot at the end of the animation. So if you go back and edit the pivot movements at the start, you may find that your foot ends up in a slightly different location at the end. If you're doing very long animation, it may pay to break your animation down into separate layers for different sequences, just to remove the effect of this history dependence somewhat from your scene.